Jesus walks on water. Jesus told his disciples to go on ahead of him. Then Jesus walks up a mountainside to pray. Storm clouds filled the sky. Jesus could see the disciples in the boat. They were having trouble. The wind whooshed, the waves sloshed, the boat was tossed about. Suddenly the disciples saw someone walking on the water towards them. They thought it was a ghost. Jesus called out to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." The disciples still weren't sure. Peter said, "If you really are Jesus, let me walk up to you." Jesus replied, "Come." Peter stepped out of the boat. He began walking on the water towards Jesus. Then Peter looked at the wind and the waves. He became afraid. Suddenly he started to sink. "Lord, save me," Peter cried out. Jesus reached out and pulled Peter up. "Why do you trust me?" Jesus asked Peter. They climbed into the boat and the storm stopped. The disciples worshipped Jesus. They said, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Some young Costa Rican basilisk lizards are looking for food. Basilisks have been nicknamed the Jesus Christ lizard. Why? This adult male, probably the father of the young lizards, can't tell us. Nor can this female, exclusive property of the territorial male. It has nothing to do with the feeding habits of the basilisk, which consists primarily of insects and berries. This predatory reptile will help reveal the secret as it stalks the young basilisk. The basilisk is called the Jesus Christ lizard because it can walk, well, really run on water. It bicycles its hind legs, and the tail becomes a counterweight. We can't know what the snake is thinking. Did it really want to eat the lizard, or did it just want to show?
It's time for science, courtesy of Daredevil, scientist himself, Greg Fitz.
Hey!
Thanks so much. Good to be back. It's good to have you back. Now, what have you got in front of us here? Because I can't wait.
I've got fun, I've got mess.
Yes.
Got a bit of a competition. Also got the science of custard.
Custards.
Not something you probably think about every day. But first, this is just a container of water, right? It's flowing. Put your hand in there, just make sure it's normal water.
Yeah, it just feels like normal
Nothing
water.
special about it, right?
Yeah.
It's a liquid.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Isaac Newton earlier.
Yes.
As part of the mission patch competition. Now, as well as talking about gravity, he talked about loads of other things, including force and motion, that sort of stuff. This behaves just like he thought it would. Okay. You know, you put a force through it, which is just touching it, pushing through it, and it behaves like a liquid. Easy. This, however, a little bit different.
Okay.
This is custard powder and water, so it's just a custard mix.
Just normal custard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put your hand through this one.
Oh, that feels like clay.
Isn't it weird?
All of a sudden, it has a drag on it.
So you can see that it flows, right? So you'd think it's a liquid, but, right, get your hands right in there.
Okay.
Try to grab some of it. Just grab some of that liquid in your hand, but then keep the pressure on it when it's in your hand. And what you get is you can actually form a ball like that, and it turns into a solid, and then you let go, and it turns back into a liquid again.
This is just custard.
This is weird. Okay, so this is non-Newtonian. It's not behaving in the same way that Newton thought it would behave. Okay. Because you put a force onto this liquid, and it turns into a solid.
Hang on. It turns into a solid?
Yeah, which means we can try something. Just punch it, just hit it.
Okay.
Whoa! I'm glad that worked. Otherwise that could have been a mess. Look at that. So at the point where you're hitting it, it's getting messy, it turns into a solid and your hand doesn't go through it. And what's great about this is it has some really cool kind of applications. So what you can do is take exactly the same basic idea and you can protect your tech. So mobile phones, tablets, that sort of thing. I've got one on my phone here. You see the orange bit around the outside?
Yes.
This is basic, it's the same as this. It's not custard, but it's a non-Newtonian substance. It's a chemical compound. And what's great is it's soft and flexible, but then if you were to drop it or knock it like this...
And we've all done that.
What happens is at that point, when you put that force on it, it goes hard. Okay. So it protects your phone, absorbs all that impact, absolutely fine.
And does it just work purely for phones or?
Yeah, you can get it in sports equipment, stuff like that as well. It's called D3O. Very, very cool stuff.
Now, I've actually pulled my jeans up ready for this.
Oh yeah.
We've got a big load of custard
This
here.
is what I thought we need to upscale this. We need to make this bigger. That was like a couple of litres. This is well over 300 litres of custard powder and water. Now, have a look. It's a lovely flowing liquid.
Yeah,
okay?
it is, yeah.
But hopefully, you ready for this? Give that a bit of a punch. Will it work? Yes,
Yes,
it turns into a solid when you hit it.
This is the coolest thing ever.
So I thought, would it be possible for you, Radzi, to run over this?
Okay,
Shall I go for it? Yeah, why
let's do a
not?
countdown. 3, 2, 1.
Go, go, go! Push really hard with your feet.
I'm going. We nearly had a disaster. How is this happening, Greg?
Okay, so you've got all these custard particles, custard powder particles, covered in water in there as well, right? Yeah. And what's happening is they can glide over each other, and that's why they act just like a liquid. But as soon as you push down on top of them with the force of your hand or your foot, you push the liquid out the way, all those custard particles lock together, and it acts like a solid. So go for a little run.
Do you know, it feels like you're sort of running in a really muddy puddle, but somehow I'm not going through it.
Isn't it brilliant?
Yeah.
If you were to stop,
Yes.
what would happen is yeah, you'd sink because you wouldn't have that force on top of the custard mix anymore. I don't know how I'm going to get you out.
You don't know?
No.
Well, that's, well, Greg, thank you very much.
Live, isn't it? Yeah, good.
Lindsay, help me!
I love that Razzie's actually stuck. You can bring the custard again, Greg.
So here we go.
I didn't think it was going to happen. Like, I just expected him to fall right in. And then he did it, and it was just step after step.
I don't know what to say, man. I was just I was in the pool and I was just watching, and it's kind of shocking because he's like right in front of me, and walking on water.
He just started walking across, and I was just like, no, there's got to be something he's walking on. No, not at all. I swam right underneath him. It was incredible.
He is the best, the best. Take it from me, he is the best.
Today, Lolly read to you about the miracle of Jesus walking on water. Now, there's a few funny things about walking on water. It's not possible for a human being to walk on water. I know that when my mother was a little girl, she truly believed that she could actually walk on water. She put one foot on the water, it seemed to float quite nicely. She put the other foot on some water. That also seemed to float quite nicely. But when she stood up, she immediately sank into, I can't remember whose pond it was actually, but she got in trouble for getting completely wet, and so it's not wise to try and walk on water. Jesus can walk on water, we can't. Now, attached, or I think as links nearby today's clip, there is a link to a basilisk lizard who can run along water. They're amazing little creatures, and just to watch them, they've got absolutely huge feet, and as they run in this really strange manner, they can actually push on the water so hard that they don't sink so long as they keep running. But is that walking on water? Not really. It's running on water. Now, if you were to change the consistency of water and thicken it up until it was like custard, then it is actually possible for a human being to run on custard. Not that there's large seas of custard anywhere, but if there were, if you slap your feet down hard enough, it pushes back against your feet and you can actually run across it. Again, there's a clip nearby this video showing on children's BBC television of somebody actually running around in a paddling pool full of custard. And he's fine until he stops, and then he immediately sinks up to his ankles and gets completely stuck. So again, even running on custard is not a terribly good idea, because eventually you'll get tired and sink. There is, however, an animal which can literally walk on water, and that's called a water strider. Now, water striders are little insects, and they're incredibly small, and incredibly light. Now, because they are so very small and so very light, they can walk on the film which can form on top of water. If water is still for long enough, enough dirt and other debris will join together on top of it that it will actually form a little barrier. And if you're small enough and light enough, you can sit on this barrier. Now, I'm not sure if it's been there long enough, but I have a tray of water, because I'm sure everybody is missing Gordon's experiments at church. And so here is a Gordon-esque experiment for you to try. All you need is some water, which has been sat still for a while. This has been sat still for about 10 minutes. Probably best to leave it for more than like an hour, but I'm hoping it's going to work. Now, this is a needle with some thread still on it from the last thing I sewed. Put the thread away, don't need that. Now, if you do it from close enough and your water's been sat still for long enough, you should be able to drop the needle onto the surface of the water and it should float. Alright, how deep's my water? I can't. There we go. If you look incredibly carefully, there is a needle and it is floating on the water. Now, if I move the water a bit, there you go, you can see it. That needle is definitely bobbing about on the surface of the water despite being solid metal. There we go. But having said that, the only reason the needle can do this is because it's incredibly light, which I am not incredibly light, and therefore I can't walk on water. Now, one of the strangest things about Jesus walking on water is, why did Jesus walk on water? It's a very good question. And the answer is annoyingly simple. Jesus walked on water for the same reason as the original chicken crossed the road. He crossed the road to get to the other side. That's why he walked on water. Now, why he sent his disciples on ahead of him in a boat and they didn't all walk across together, I'm not sure. I think it's mainly because that would just be showing off. And this was not something he wanted to do in front of crowds of people. He had only just fed 5,000 of them with not very much food at all, I think. Yes, that's what he just did. And so he did do large miracles, but everything he did, people could choose not to believe if they wanted to. But actually walking across a lake so big it was referred to as a sea, that is something that only his disciples would get to see him do. Because, as I say, the reason he was doing it was to get to the other side and to catch up with them as they were rowing. Now, how Jesus walked on the water, there you can see, my needle, because I jogged the table, has now sunk. Oops. Right. How Jesus walked on water is very interesting. Did he change the properties of the water so it was like custard? I don't think so, because if he'd done that, then he'd have had to run. Or did he make himself very, very big feet so he could run it again? No, he'd have to run. Or did he just cause all of the film of water on top of the entire sea to gather in one place so he could walk on that? We're never really going to know. Now, if you look at the pictures, there's some of the things that always made me wonder about it was it wasn't even a flat sea when he walked on it. It was all over the place. Look at the state of it. They've had to take their sail in because the wind is too strong, and they're all really scared. And then look at that, it's not even flat. And there's Jesus just standing in the middle of it. Now, I mean, initially when they see him, they think he's a ghost. I'm not entirely sure why they think he's a ghost. Maybe it's because they can't think of anything real that would be there. And then when he shouts, when he shouts to them and says, "It's me," then Peter says, "Well, tell me to come to you then," which he does. But just as he's getting near Jesus, he suddenly thinks, "Flipping heck, I'm walking on water." And as soon as he realises that, he immediately sinks. It's almost like a cartoon character that's run off the edge of a cliff but hasn't noticed yet. But as soon as Jesus reaches out to him and takes his hand, he's fine. And then they just climb back in the boat, and Jesus takes him by the hand, as I would Jodie when she was younger and couldn't walk, and walks him just back to the boat. Now, obviously, the only reason Jesus can do this is because he actually is God. And only God can play with the physics of our planet so much. He can make all of the fish in the sea run into somebody's net, and he can make the wind and waves calm down, and he can make the water to decide to just hold together so solidly under his feet that he can walk on it. Now, there have been magicians who've tried to walk on water and make it look very impressive. The most impressive one I saw was a bloke called Chris Angel, and he walked across a swimming pool. He did it incredibly slowly because he had to try and remember exactly where he'd left the huge glass blocks in the pool that he was actually walking on. And if he walked too fast, he'd probably just knock them over and fall in, which wouldn't be very impressive to anybody. But again, he wasn't really walking on water. He had huge glass blocks in the pool, and it was a very still day, so they wouldn't notice. But yes, lots of people have tried to emulate this, but because they're not God, they can't. So what we need to do is praise God that he is just beyond our understandings of science and physics, and we just need to remember that in humility, that he's just that much better than us, and we will never really understand him entirely. But one day we can go to meet him, and when we do, we can say, "Jesus, can you walk with me across that pond?" And he might say, Yeah, let's go for a walk across that pond.